All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 38 of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. It is once again my pleasure to be joined with my co-host, Ryan Marister.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get this podcast started, I just want to quickly mention a
Oh,
rivalry game tonight between the Ryan's Cavaliers and my Phoenix Suns. Missing five of our key players, we still beat Cleveland because Devin Booker doesn't miss. So just wanted to throw that out there. It was a great game. I have much respect for both teams.
thank you.
But the better team won tonight.
Okay.
And that's how the cookie crumbles, as they say. Anyways, getting to tonight's podcast, we're obviously going to talk about that game called the Super Bowl yesterday, although it wasn't much of a Super Bowl. And a little bit more NFL, and then we got a little NBA to talk about. But Ryan, I'll hand it off to you to get us going on our Super Bowl discussion.
Yeah, of course. And I just wanted to say, if we're gonna mention our rivalry game, Colin Sexton for the All-Star game, please. Get him in the All-Star game. Everyone go vote for him.
He
He
might
deserves
make
to be in.
the what's the rookie game called?
The Rising
Oh, the Rising
Stars.
Stars. He might make
Oh,
that one, yeah.
wow. The disrespect is unbelievable. But anyways, we can move on to this Super Bowl. I mean, this happened just yesterday. And Trevor, I mean, this was not what any of us anticipated. Certainly not what
Nope.
you or I anticipated. And I don't know if many or if anybody thought this was going to happen. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers went in to their home stadium, played the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and won 31-9. This game, honestly, I feel like it played closer than it sounds, Trevor. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that everyone, myself included, thought Kansas City would figure it out. I thought going into halftime, they were down 21-6. I was like, okay, Kansas City can come back from this. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Tampa Bay should be a little
Mm-hmm.
concerned. Like Mahomes is going to figure it out. Andy Reid's going to make an adjustment, and it just never happened. And this goes to a bigger thing, and I want to talk about the Chiefs pretty much explicitly here because I think this all falls on them. The Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. And going into this year, you'd think that they were well prepared and well coached and ready for the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't look like that, Trevor. To me, honestly, it didn't really look like they were really they just looked sloppy. Most of their team looked like they weren't playing their best. Outside of Patrick Mahomes, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they had 11 penalties for 120 yards,
Yeah.
which is just a backbreaker in the Super Bowl. And for the defending champs to have that many penalties for that many yards in the biggest game of the year, I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was caught off guard. I didn't expect them to have that many mistakes. I just
Mm-hmm.
simply didn't. So the defense wasn't good. They couldn't stop Leonard Fournette. I mean, he had 90 yards and a touchdown. Ronald Jones with another 60, 65 yards on the ground. They couldn't stop Rob Gronkowski, a guy who came out of retirement and, wasn't really effective for a lot of the season this year. He absolutely popped off in the Super Bowl. They simply couldn't get it done. You could see the frustration. You could see Tyrann Mathieu getting frustrated. You could see a lot of their defense getting frustrated. And, they couldn't stop them when it mattered. And the offense, Trevor, was just as bad. I mean, this was almost painful to watch. I'm no like massive Kansas City fan, but watching Mahomes run around, run for his life, run 10 or 15 yards backwards in the pocket, only to find a way to stay on his feet and get the ball off and get it to the receiver a lot of the times, Trevor. Like, these
Mm-hmm.
receivers also had multiple drops. Travis Kelce had a
Mm-hmm.
big drop. I believe it was Demarcus Robinson had a drop on one of the best throws I've ever seen by a quarterback, where Mahomes was falling over almost parallel to the ground and threw it 25 to 30 yards in the air to Demarcus
Yeah.
Robinson, and it hit his hands and he just dropped it. And it's like, man, I just didn't expect this. I just didn't expect this level of mediocrity, these amount of mistakes
Mm-hmm.
by the reigning champs. And it came back to bite them. They couldn't overcome it. Mahomes tried his best. He just couldn't will his team to victory. They just couldn't get anything done. And credit to the Bucks. They came out, angry because Kansas City embarrassed them, about 10 weeks ago back in Tampa Bay in the same stadium. And, they showed everyone that they could play with them. And not only could they play with them, but they dominated them. So credit to Tampa Bay. Great win. Tom Brady, another Super Bowl. He was simply, I mean, he got the job done. He played very well. And I don't know. Kansas City's had too many mistakes.
I totally agree with almost everything you just said there. I think the story of this game was, excuse me, Kansas City's mistakes and Kansas City's non-existent offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm actually trying to say is Kansas City's team didn't show up to play. They put together their worst performance of the year on both sides of the ball. Their defense really was not good. A ton of penalties, particularly at the end of the half, that gave Tampa Bay that third touchdown to go up 21-6 into the locker room. Their receivers were horrible, lots of key drops, balls hitting the guys in the face mask. And the offensive line, that was one of the worst showings from an offensive line I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes was not comfortable in the pocket from one play I saw. I didn't see one play where Mahomes had time to throw and sat in the pocket and delivered a dot to somebody.
No.
And you could see it every time the ball was snapped, 1 or 2 seconds, Mahomes is running for his life, and it got in his head, and he wasn't able to. Kansas City wasn't able to execute an offense because everything was turning into a broken play, and it felt like Mahomes was playing 1-on-11. It just felt like there was nothing from anybody else on that side of the football. And I want to talk about Tampa Bay and just the Tom Brady effect. And I heard that the mayor of Tampa Bay might rename the city to Tampa Bay. And I think that is a very serious thing he should take into consideration, because Tampa Bay had the worst winning percentage of any sports franchise in any sport in the United States. I think they're under, in its franchise history, they're under 40% overall as a franchise in the win-loss percentage. So in 1 year for Tom Brady to come in, they bring in guys like Gronkowski, they bring in guys like Antonio Brown, and they bring in guys on defense like Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul and a couple other guys. For them to win the Super Bowl and to dominate the Kansas City Chiefs, the mighty Chiefs, the heavy favorites, and for them to just figure it out. It took them the whole season to figure out how they were going to win football games, and they figured it out. They won their last 8 games, 4 of them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady's the GOAT. It's as simple as that. He has 7 rings. I don't see Mahomes catching him. I thought if Mahomes won yesterday, he'd have a shot. But now I don't think there's any chance he gets to 7. That's all I really have to say. I think all the credit in the world goes to Tampa Bay. And Kansas City just wasn't well prepared. I think that goes on the coaching staff. In a game like this, coaching is huge and preparation is huge. And it just felt like Tampa Bay was more prepared. And one final thing, I know I'm taking a while on this. Tom Brady, every night from the conference championship to Super Bowl Sunday, he would text the entire team at 11 p.m. at night and go, "We are going to win this game." And it's just that kind of leadership, that kind of competitive drive that no one else has in the NFL. And that's why Tom Brady is the greatest player to ever do it. And credit to Tampa. They played a great game.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I want to point something out, Trevor, in regards to Tom Brady. And I'm pretty sure this is correct. Tom Brady himself has 7 Super Bowl wins, 7 Super Bowl rings. Mm-hmm. That's more than any other NFL franchise in the entire NFL. He has more rings himself than any other NFL team, which that to me is just that is unbelievable. He not only is he the greatest of all time in football, he very well could be the best sports athlete in just sports history that we've ever seen. I mean, winning 7 titles in arguably the hardest sport to do it. I mean, you can have a debate about that, another time, but I'd argue that in the NFL, it's the hardest sport to repeat, or not repeat, but win multiple times. It's very, very hard. I mean, you look at guys like Aaron Rodgers, who I believe only has 1 ring, Trevor.
Drew Brees, 1 ring.
1 ring. Eli Manning has 2. Peyton Manning has 2, I believe.
Peyton Manning got 2. One of them was all carried because of that defense and super late in his career. But to your point.
Well, yeah, but to my point, it's very hard to win multiple Super Bowls.
Right.
Even as a Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, some of those guys I mentioned are Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And Tom Brady has 7. So, I mean, I really don't think there's any argument that he's the best player of all time, but he might even be the best pro athlete of all time, just because, how fantastic he's been, how many titles he's won, and the fact that he did it outside of Bill Belichick's, oversight. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, everyone said, they made each other. But Tom Brady went out this year in his old age of 41 or 42, and he said, you know what, I'm going to show them that I can win without Bill Belichick, and he did it. So, credit where credit's due. And one more thing that I want to say about this game is, I thought it was very, I just thought it was very kind of justified or kind of fun that Antoine Winfield, Trevor, do you remember, I believe when Tyreek Hill, I think he broke up a pass or something, and he looks at Tyreek Hill and he gives him the peace sign, which is exactly what Tyreek Hill did to him back in week 10. Or week 8 or whenever they played, when he did a backflip into the end zone and gave Antoine Winfield the peace sign after scoring a touchdown. So, I thought that was kind of, you know, uh, poetic
It
justice.
was worth the unsportsmanlike
It
conduct
was.
penalty.
It
And it just
was.
goes to show you Tampa Bay clearly did not forget what happened on their field
Hmm.
back in whenever they played week 12, week 11, it was
Yeah,
something
something
like
like that.
that. So it was clear that Tampa Bay wanted this game. They wanted this matchup. And I think the competitive spirit of Tom Brady uplifted this entire team. And you could see it.
Hmm.
They just wanted it more than Kansas City. They were more prepared. They had a quicker first step. And nobody on Kansas City, there was no emotion. There was no like, all right, we need to get it going,
Hmm.
right? Even when they were down 28-6, and now it's like, okay, it's now or never. There was never any, it just didn't feel like Kansas City ever had the urgency to win this game. And that's on the coaching staff and that's on your leaders, in my opinion. And I think Patrick Mahomes, he didn't play a great game, but it's hard to play a great game when you are running around for your life every play. He took
Yeah.
10 hits this game, only 3 sacks, but took 10 hits. And there were many more plays where he was under duress. So
Yep.
for me, this was just a complete dominating performance by Tampa Bay on both sides of the ball. And Kansas City is going to have an interesting offseason thinking about, how are they going to recover from this? Yes, they have Patrick Mahomes, but they clearly have some deficiencies they'll need to address.
Yeah, 100%. And one last thing before we move on, just addressing the offensive line, losing Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz on that offensive line were two just
Mm-hmm.
obviously
Huge.
insurmountable losses, right? I mean, two arguably Pro Bowl caliber offensive linemen who
Mm-hmm.
were out in this game, and they had to move around two other offensive linemen because they didn't have a capable starting, I believe, left tackle. So they had to move around a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
to, fix that O line. And it just caused chaos, clearly. And it was just, I guess they couldn't figure it out, which is definitely on the coaching staff. I mean, you got to figure that out. You got to have that
Right.
ready for that game.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think they just got out coached at the end of the day, I suppose, which I did not expect.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, but Trevor, I think if that's all we have on the Super Bowl, I think we can move on to our next topic of discussion in the NFL, which it was a pretty surprising trade, Trevor. A trade that I didn't expect. A trade that I don't know if you expected, but I feel like most of the league was kind of caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Stafford was traded from the Detroit Lions to the Los Angeles Rams. And
Mm-hmm.
in return, the Lions got Jared Goff, a 2021 third rounder, and a 2022 and 2023 first round picks. So they got 3 picks in return, 2 firsts and a third,
Mm-hmm.
plus Jared Goff. So Trevor, I wanted to ask you, who won this trade, the Lions or the Rams?
It's hard to say, right?
Mm.
I'm friends with some Rams fans, and they have made it clear to me that they love this trade. They love getting rid of Goff. They thought they hated him. They just did not believe in him, and clearly the Rams organization did not believe in him either. I mean, you sign him to an extension, and then 2 years later you trade him for an old Matthew Stafford while giving up 3 future draft picks. If I'm Jared Goff, that's a reality check right there that I need to figure something out. So here's what I'll say. I think the Rams obviously are going to win this trade in the short term because I do think getting Matthew Stafford makes this team arguably the favorites in the NFC next year, right? You're going to have Green Bay. They'll be right there. Tampa Bay will be right there. But then outside of that, I mean, Seattle maybe. I mean, San Francisco, if they get healthy, they'll be there as well. I think the Rams could be the best team in the NFC. They already have the best defense in the entire NFL. So for me, I think the Rams won this trade. And for the Lions, it's nice getting some future draft picks, but you only get a third rounder this year, and then you get a first rounder in 2 years and a first rounder in 3 years, which is great long term, but you're not going to see that success for years, right? It's going to be a while before you start seeing, their side of this trade,
Yeah.
come to fruition. So I think the Rams won this trade just because the Lions draft picks are in future years. If they would have gotten 2 firsts this year or a first this year and a second this year and maybe a first next year, then I would say maybe the Lions win this trade. But I don't know. Clearly the Rams think there's something wrong with Jared Goff to where they would be willing to give up 3 future draft picks, 2 firsts for him, or to get Matthew Stafford, let alone think about it. Deshaun Watson's out there. He wants a trade. Instead, they settle for Matthew Stafford.
Mm.
So I'm going to say the Rams won this trade. But I think it works out for both teams. Again, it's one of those trades where it's going to obviously benefit the Rams more in the short term. But if the Lions draft well, maybe in 5 years, it'll be a trade the Lions will look back on and be like, yeah, that was a good trade for us.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, I don't want to have too much agreement on here, but I do agree with you. I mean, I think that a lot of what you said, I agree with. I think the Rams won this trade both in the short term and the long term, and here's why. They have Stafford for the next 2 seasons, right? And he's a
Hmm.
solid quarterback. He's not elite, but he's also above average. And that's all they really need. They need a guy who's above average who doesn't
Hmm.
limit their offense. A lot of the reason I think they moved on from Jared Goff, Trevor, is because Sean McVay, he's a very good play caller. He's very good at kind of him,
Yes.
him and Kyle Shanahan, Kevin Stefanski, all these coaches, these offensive minded guys, they're very good at molding their offense to their quarterback, to their strengths, and preventing them
Right.
from showing their weaknesses. The problem is, I think McVay felt that, Goff didn't really have all that many strengths anymore. And it was weird because I remember only 2 years ago, the Rams offense, was flourishing. They had Brandon Cooks, they had a shootout with Kansas City. It was both of them scored over 50 points. I thought Jared Goff was going to be one of the next young,
Right.
near elite or very good quarterbacks. And he just kind of fell off a little bit. He wasn't able to
Hmm.
make consistent deep throws. He could only really make throws around the line of scrimmage. And I mean, if you watch their offense, Trevor, at the end of the season, it was a lot of Cam Akers, a lot of short passes to Robert Woods around the line of scrimmage, short passes to
Hmm.
Cooper Kupp a few yards off the line of scrimmage. Not a lot there. So I think they were just tired of that, and they decided to get Stafford, who is under contract for 2 years, and then they're off the books, which I think is
Hmm.
key because they're off the books of Stafford, and they don't have Goff either. Goff was on the books for 4 more seasons on
Yeah.
on a very very lucrative deal. I think it's 5 years, 110 million, something like that, which is a lot of money to pay a guy who's definitely like at best an average quarterback at best.
Right. Right.
So I think it's good they got off that contract. I think it's good that they improved at quarterback in the short term. And the picks they gave up, listen, it's not that big of a deal to give up those picks to me. Because as long in the NFL, if you draft well in the mid to late rounds, you can afford to give up a few first rounders if you're very good at drafting the second, third, and fourth
Hmm.
rounds. You can easily recoup your losses in those later rounds if you're confident in your scouting ability. So I think the Rams are confident in that, and I think they've shown that in the past that they can draft pretty well. And we'll see where it takes them. But I think they win this trade both now because they have Stafford and they can contend better, and in the long term because they're no longer under Goff's contract.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about the contract and how Jared Goff. I don't know who's more lucrative. I think it's close between the two of them. But as you
Pretty
mentioned,
close.
Stafford's only under contract for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Goff would have been under contract for another, at least, I think it was 4 years,
Yep,
right?
it was 4.
Four.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there you go. I think that's a great point. They already have a very expensive roster. They have a lot of high paid guys on the defensive side, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's going to be guys, there's always going to be someone else you're going to have to pay in the NFL, a young guy that you're eventually going to have to pay or get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, yeah, you make a great point. The fact that they were able to get that contract off the books and, they're going to take on an expensive one in Stafford, but for 2 less years, it's a good point. I will say about the draft picks, I do think getting 2 first round picks for the Lions is nice because first round picks in the NFL are really, even late first round picks in the NFL are super, super, super or I should say
Viable.
receiver, but are much more important than late first round picks in other sports, in my opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
you do make a good point about if you draft right, those second, third, and fourth rounders can pan out as well. But I think in the case of the Lions as a rebuilding team, having more opportunities in those early rounds will benefit them. But yeah, I agree. I think the Rams did a nice job here. And as I said, the NFC West just got a little bit harder, and the Rams are going to be a tough out next year in the NFL.
Yep, 100%. It'll be fun to watch the NFC West. Them and the AFC North are arguably, actually, undoubtedly, in my opinion, the two best divisions in football. It's just a matter of who.
The NFC West is number one. It's close between them and the AFC North, but the NFC West is the best division. Let's get it straight.
To each their own. We can talk about that another time. But hey, both the divisions are undoubtedly elite. But Trevor, I mean, I think that that about wraps it up for the NFL. Unless you have any final thoughts on that trade.
I'm
Um,
good.
Yeah, but with that, we can move on to the NBA, and the NBA is still in full swing, and we've had quite a few games over the last 8 to 10 days, and standings are continuing to take shape. Trevor, teams are starting to make moves, teams are starting to fall behind, and I wanted to start off by talking about a team that's falling behind. actually. And it's a team that I didn't
Mhm.
expect to fall behind, really. And that's the Dallas Mavericks, Trevor. They're 10-14 right now. They've lost 7 of their last 10. And, they're struggling to play defense. And I would say I don't know why, but I do. I mean, you look at this team, you look at this roster, and I just don't see much outside of Luka Doncic, Josh Richardson, Kristaps, and Tim Hardaway Jr. Like honestly, those
Mhm.
4 players, Trevor, is the vast majority of that team. And when you really have 4 players, kind of there as support for that team, there's not much. Like there's really not much you can do. I mean, their bench is full of, a bunch of average iffy bench players at best, Willie Cauley-Stein, Dwight Powell, Boban Marjanovic, uh, Jalen Brunson's okay. Trey Burke, I don't know, a bunch of okay players who really,
Mhm.
haven't made much of an impact for them and are not helping them on the defensive end. I can tell you that. And, they need strong defenders on this team, Trevor, because their star players in Luka, especially, they're not particularly great defenders. Luka is an
No.
average defender, I would say. I mean, he's okay, but you need to be able to mask that or help surround him with some solid defenders. And they don't have that right now. I mean, Josh Richardson might be their best defender in their
Mhm.
starting lineup, or Kristaps maybe, but yeah, there's just not much there. And they need to figure it out because I mean, Trevor, they're losing a lot of games. I mean, you look at just the other
Mhm.
day, they gave up 147 points to the Golden State Warriors. And I get the Golden State Warriors are playing better now, right? They're 12-10. They're solid this year. They're in the
Mhm.
playoff contention, and they have some talent. But they let Kelly Oubre go for 40 and 7 for 10 from three. I mean, we've seen his struggles this year. He's shooting about 23% from the 3-point line, so he's had his a ton of struggles.
Mhm.
A lot of tough nights for Kelly Oubre this year. But he popped off against them, and when that happens,
Right.
when guys who are struggling the whole season just pop off against you, something's wrong with your defense. And Luka said it in an interview the other night. He said, like, we're just playing terrible basketball. And Luka knows it. He's like, we're just not playing good basketball. And this team has to figure it out. With Kristaps healthy, finally, it looks like hopefully they'll have an opportunity to right the ship. They
Mhm.
just beat Golden State the other night, so maybe this is a sign of something coming. But you know, I've been disappointed with this team, both on the defensive side and just an inability to win games because they're just not able to outscore opponents. Luka and Kristaps can't do enough, and they don't have a good enough supporting cast. Um, so I don't know if you have any thoughts, but
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think their bench is okay. I like that they actually bring Hardaway off the bench. I think that's a huge bonus for them. It
mm,
kind of reminds me of how the Jazz bring Jordan Clarkson off the bench. It's kind of like instant offense.
mhm.
And other guys like Jalen Brunson, Trey Burke are guys that can make plays, maybe not as consistently as you'd like. I think the big issue for Dallas is defense.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at the standings right now in the Western Conference, and this is the trend I'm looking at. The top 4 teams in the Western Conference standings, Utah, LA's, and my Phoenix Suns, are the 4 teams with the lowest opponents' points per game average. So if you want to win, you got to be at least somewhat capable on the defensive side of the ball. Dallas is not. They gave up 40 to Oubre, and then the next night, Steph Curry, I think, drops 57. I think is what
Yeah,
it
I,
was,
I think you're
57
right.
on him.
Yep.
So yeah, you're totally right. Dallas has an inability to play defense. Um, and for me, I don't know. I think the Western Conference got better. I think Dallas is kind of like a Toronto and Miami of this year, except in the Western Conference, where the West got better. I mean, Golden State improved from last year. Sacramento's better. Portland's better. Memphis is still better. New Orleans is playing a little bit better.
San
Utah's
Antonio.
playing great. San Antonio's better. So for me, the Western Conference got better, and Dallas. I don't know if they got worse, but they haven't improved. And I think a big loss for them that people aren't talking about is Seth Curry,
Yes.
who's been having an unbelievable year for the 76ers. Ryan and I talked about this a little bit off air. Seth Curry's like just under 50% from the 3-point line on the season. Um, but yeah, I think you covered Dallas pretty well. They need to figure it out on defense, and they need a consistent third option.
Mm.
Luka and Kristaps are obviously going to be a good 1-2 punch. But, Tim Hardaway stepped up tonight again against the Timberwolves, though. So if you can get Tim Hardaway or Josh Richardson or somebody like that to give you 15 to 20 as a third option, I think they'll be okay. And obviously, they need to figure out the defensive side of all because that has been a disaster. And that's all I got on Dallas. I think they'll be all right. I still think they're going to contend for a playoff spot, particularly in this new playoff format where the top 10 at least get a play-in game, or 7 through 10 gets a play-in game.
Mm.
So I think Dallas will be okay. But yes, you're right. There's definitely concerns here.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping they can bounce back, because they do have two, at least one, arguably two superstars. So anything can happen when you have that dynamic duo. But I don't know. I mean, I'd be worried if I was a Mavericks fan, no doubt. But Trevor, with that, I think we can move on to our next team. And we can talk about one of your teams, Trevor. And you wanted to talk about your hometown team, the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah,
And I know,
I do. I do
they
actually.
I know they had a good win tonight. It was a close game, some questionable calls by the referees, but the Suns
Oh
got it.
my God.
The Suns got it done. The Suns got it done. And Trevor, I mean, tell me what you think about this team this year. What's different from last year?
No, I agree. There were definitely some questionable calls in tonight's game. That's why Cleveland had 10 more free throws than us. But I agree, there were some questionable calls. Anyways, Ryan and I talk about this a lot, actually, on air and off air,
Yeah.
how hard it is to win games in the NBA. And it takes years to learn how to win games, right?
Mhm.
You're seeing it with a lot of young teams. Dallas, I guess, for example, Cleveland is a decent example right now. New Orleans is a good example. Being a young team, they're learning it's hard to win basketball games.
Mhm.
That's the next progression, right? Now you're competing, but then you got to learn how to win basketball games. So for the Suns, this is why I think Monty Williams has done such a great job. Last year we were competing, right? We were right there, lost a lot of close games. This year you bring in a veteran in Chris Paul. You get some maturation from Cam Johnson, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Booker, our young guys. And now we're learning how to win. Even when we don't play our best, even when we're shorthanded like we were tonight, we're learning how to win. And it just goes to show that the NBA is hard, man. I mean, it's a condensed schedule. It's a tough 48-minute game. It's very fast paced. And I think as a Suns fan, I'm very happy to see my team, improving each and every game. We're on a hot streak right now. I mean, we've won 6 of our last 7. And there was a point where I was really worried. I texted one of my friends. I was like, the Suns are falling apart. We were 8-8. We lost 3 in a row. I think we had lost like 5 of our, or I believe it was 5 of our last 6. And I
Mhm.
was like, we're going to be an average 7 or 8 seed. I don't even know if we'll make the playoffs. And now we're back in 4th place in the West. We're winning games again, and it feels great. And one more point on the Suns. I think Chris Paul is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, and you can see it. In 1 year with Oklahoma City, he takes a below average roster to the playoffs and almost wins a playoff series against a much better Houston team. This year he comes to Phoenix, and in a quarter of a season, he has the Suns right in the playoff mix. I don't know if we'll finish 4th in the West, but I do think we'll be a playoff team. And it's just his leadership and his presence and his ability to just make people better around him. And that's what I'm very impressed with, and why I'm happy about the Phoenix Suns and where they're at right now, and why I feel obligated to talk about them tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points. And, even though I'm kind of biased because, I have a lot of friends who are Suns fans, so I like to root against them a little bit. I got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, this team, I watched them, a lot tonight, obviously, because they played my Cleveland Cavaliers. And this team, Trevor, you're right. They're past their rebuild phase. They're into the contending phase, I would argue. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
key to a team. Like you said, I mean, teams have to learn how to close games out. And I don't want to repeat exactly what you said, but, there are a lot of teams who, either are perpetually stuck in the phase of being unable to win games consistently, like it seems like
Mm-hmm.
Dallas is. I don't want to jump ahead too much, or like a team like Sacramento, or something like that, a team that has some talent, but, continually kind of hangs around the 8, 9, 10, 11 seed spot
Mm-hmm.
and never really makes that jump. And I think that comes down to two things. It comes down to veteran leadership in the locker room and coaching. And you said Monty Williams done a very good job. And that's what an organization needs to do. They need to hire a head coach that can further the team culture and get them from, a rebuilding contending team that's
Mm-hmm.
scrappy to a team that's on the forefront and leads the
Right.
charge in the game, controls the game, and closes the game out. And that's what happened tonight with Phoenix. They made shots, they didn't turn the ball over at the end, and Cleveland missed shots and turned the ball over at the end. And that's the difference between these two teams right now. And that's why Cleveland's a year or two behind Phoenix in terms of where they're at team wise. And that's why Phoenix is
Mm-hmm.
going to contend for the playoffs this year. And in regards to Chris Paul, Trevor, I actually think that, you know, when they first did the trade, I was a little skeptical, you know, how I was.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little on the older side. The
Right.
contract's up soon. He's expensive. I actually think his impact is bigger off the floor than on the floor, in my personal opinion. I really think that getting a guy who's been there, who's won in big moments, who's made the big play, you know, to get a guy in there for the young guys and teach them what to do when it matters most, when
Mm-hmm.
it all comes
Mm-hmm.
down to the final play, the final shot, you know, the final pass. You know, I think having a guy there, even on the bench, just being there, just telling them what to do, is so important. And I think that you see that with the Suns this year, and I think you see that with Chris
Mm-hmm.
Paul. And you know, I think once Chris Paul leaves, you know, probably in 2 years, retires or moves on, whatever. I think that'll stick with the players on Phoenix, and I think they'll be just fine
Mm-hmm.
without him. And I think so I think at the end of the day, the trade actually will end up paying off and working in their favor if that is the case. And the team's going to be fun to watch. I mean, they're a scrappy team who plays defense and, you know, doesn't really give up and fights tooth and nail. And they're solid on the offensive side, obviously with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton playing much better. By the way, he was
Mm-hmm.
pretty solid tonight. You know, I was skeptical about him, you know, his improvement, but he's definitely stepped up big time in
Mm-hmm.
recent weeks and definitely tonight. So, you know, credit to him.
Absolutely. One final point on the Suns. I know I could talk about them all night. It was a game, 2 games ago against Dallas, 1 game ago maybe, and
Hmm.
what happened was we were down 2, and Devin Booker hits a three with 1 second left. And the first words out of his mouth after he makes the three are one stop. And I thought to myself, that is Chris Paul rubbing off on him.
Hmm.
Chris Paul is teaching young guys like Devin Booker who are really good players. Devin Booker has been a prolific scorer his whole career. He's been, you know, just individually a great talent, but he's never won, right?
Yep.
He obviously had a bad roster around him, but you know that's no excuse. That's an excuse, but
Still,
he
I mean, he
hasn't
never
won
won.
before.
Hmm.
And I think Chris Paul is drilling into the mindset that each game is 48 minutes. And if you want to win in this league, you can never take your foot off the gas. And I think when Devin Booker was like back in the huddle, one stop, guys, first words out of his mouth, I just thought to myself, that's Chris Paul rubbing off on these guys. And it's great to see. And I think Booker loves that we're winning. I'm sure he's a very competitive guy. He wants to win. So I hope he continues to keep playing how he did tonight. He was spectacular tonight. But yeah, that's all I got to say about my Suns. Let's hope we keep it going. I hope us talking about them doesn't, you know, cause us to go on a 4-game losing streak, but you never know. But Ryan, I'm going to toss it back to you to talk about one other team that's also been very good this year.
Yep, the Philadelphia 76ers. I want to talk about this team because I'm not sure, Trevor, if they're legit. I'm not sure yet. And you know, right now they're playing very well. I believe they're 17-7.
Correct.
They're number one in the East. You know, they're 11-2 at home, playing well at home as expected. Even with no fans, it's kind of funny.
Right.
They still play very well at home.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, regardless, they're playing really well. And this team is playing well both offensively, putting up 114 points per game, and they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty solid defensively. I believe in the top five, maybe even top
Mm-hmm.
three in the East in defense in opponents' points per game. So I mean they're playing well on both ends of the floor, but I just don't know if they're legit yet. And I'm leaning towards yes, they are. And here's why. I think their bench, Trevor. You know, we talked about this in the offseason. We talked about this to start the
Mm-hmm.
year, but I really think their bench. You know, they did a really good job, kind of. Revamping it, improving it, overhauling it. You know, their
Mm-hmm.
bench before this year wasn't really all that good. I'm going to be honest. There wasn't a lot
Mm-hmm.
there. A lot of quality talent, but they went and got
Mm-hmm.
some guys. They got some quality players. They got Danny Green, who even in his older age is still a halfway decent defender who is shooting about 37% from three this year. So, I mean, he's shooting 37% from
Yeah, he's playing
three.
better.
He's playing fine. You know, he's a good, you know, end of bench guy to have in there, a veteran
Mm-hmm.
presence who's been there before, won titles. And then you also have Seth Curry, who we talked about was a massive loss for the Mavericks and a great addition for the 76ers. He's shooting almost 50%, Trevor, 50% from three this year, absolutely shooting the lights out of the stadium. And that's exactly what they needed because Ben Simmons obviously doesn't shoot threes. Joel Embiid shoots a limited amount of jumpers, limited amount of three attempts. So to have a guy on the wing who can shoot threes at a very high rate, a very efficient
Mm-hmm.
clip, with those guys is very, very
Mm-hmm.
important. So getting him was a big get. And Shake Milton has been pretty solid for them this year. He's averaging about 14 a game. He's been a
He
nice
has.
score.
He's been a little surprising.
Yeah, been a nice scorer off the bench for them. He's done a very nice job. So having supplemental scoring on that team has been very good for that for them and for their second unit, which would typically struggle in previous years. And I just want to see if they're legit come playoff time. Because
Mhm.
we've seen this before, Trevor. We've seen them play really well in the regular season, win a lot of games. They have a lot of talent. Will they make it? Will they push far in the playoffs? And then they kind of fall on their face in the playoffs. I'm wondering if Doc Rivers will make a difference. Maybe he'll get through to this team more than he did the Clippers team, who fell on their face last year in the playoffs.
Mhm.
The hope is that Rivers will make that difference. I don't know, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic, Trevor. And out of all the years that Embiid and Simmons have been together, I think this might be their best shot.
I agree. I think there's two reasons why Philadelphia is doing a lot better this year. One, Joel Embiid is playing at an MVP level, averaging
True.
29 and 11. That's unbelievable numbers. If I had to rank him in the MVP discussion right now, he'd be in my top five. It'd be him, Jokic,
Steph Curry.
LeBron, Steph Curry, and who am I missing? I
I
feel
don't
like I'm
know.
missing
Kevin
somebody.
Durant, maybe. I don't know. Kevin
Kevin
Durant's.
Durant, yes, Kevin Durant. So that's probably my five right now. So he is playing like a top five player in the NBA. And I think number two is they're a more well-rounded team in terms of construction, right? Last year they had a good team. I mean, they had guys like Josh Richardson, Al Horford, they had Simmons and Embiid. You'd think that's a good team,
Mhm.
but it wasn't, very well-rounded. It felt like they were too one-dimensional. There wasn't enough shooting on this team. So what do? They bring in Danny Green. They bring in Seth Curry. Two guys who can shoot the three at a very high level. And now it's a very well-rounded team. They can play in all phases, right? I mean, Ben Simmons is still an excellent defender, and this team in general is a very good defensive team. Joel Embiid can score at all three levels, and now when you double Joel Embiid, you can toss it to a guy like Seth Curry or Danny Green who can hit threes like no one's business. Seth Curry mainly, Danny Green to a lesser extent, but two guys who can hit threes. So for me, this team might not be better talent wise. I mean, you lose Al Horford as a good player, you lose Josh Richardson as a good player, but I think now it's a very well constructed, I guess, roster, and
Mhm.
it's more centered around Joel Embiid, which is I think what they had to do, and he's putting up great numbers, and he is leading the charge. And I don't think Philadelphia will win the East. I think they can. I still think they're the third or fourth best team. They're definitely not as good as Milwaukee or Brooklyn, in my opinion, and I think they're close with Boston. We'll see. But I do think this team can definitely win a playoff series or two, and they can win the East. I just don't think they will. But you're seeing the improvements, and you're seeing why people are so high on Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and now
Yeah.
it's paying off a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And just one more thing before we move on, Trevor. I want to say credit to them for not trading for James Harden. I mean, credit to them for
Mm-hmm.
sticking to their guns, and not trying to force something that they don't need
Mm-hmm.
to. Because I really
Mm-hmm.
think that, this team as constructed is good enough to go far. And I think we both agree on that.
Right.
Changing it up, changing the team locker room dynamic in the middle of the season by getting Harden and probably trading Simmons, would have messed with things. So, credit
It
to
would
them for
have.
sticking to their guns and just, committing to this roster. So we'll see what happens. I think they'll
I
be
totally
dangerous.
agree.
They might be one of the biggest threats in the East to Brooklyn. So we'll see where that leads them. But Trevor, I wanted to move on to the final team we were going to talk about tonight. A team that I think you're surprised about how solidly they're playing in the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I mean, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know specifically what you want to talk about, but go ahead and tell us about the Hornets.
I want to talk about one player, and his name is LaMelo Ball, and I think he has locked up Rookie of the Year already.
Whoa.
He's averaging 14 points, 6 assists, 6 boards. They've already had to insert him into the starting lineup because they're better with him on the floor, and he's been the one player in that draft class that's really popped off and made an impact in his rookie year, right? Last year, we saw Zion Williamson and John Morant, two guys who really made a huge impact in their rookie years. And for this season, we haven't really seen anybody take the reins like LaMelo Ball has. Anthony Edwards has been okay, but I think LaMelo Ball has definitely been far and away
Yes.
the best rookie. And it's changing. It's made the Hornets a relevant team. I know, Ryan, you didn't love the Gordon Hayward trade. I didn't love it either in terms of the money, but he is playing very well. He's averaging 23 points a game.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Rozier is averaging 19 points a game. And I look at the Hornets roster, and they have three really good guards. Terry Rozier, Devontae Graham, and LaMelo Ball are three really, really good guards. And they have a couple nice young big guys. PJ Washington's not bad. Cody Zeller can give them, I guess something. Miles Bridges has been better this year. But I think that backcourt has been great for them. And this is a borderline playoff team. With the way LaMelo's playing, with the way Gordon Hayward's playing, this team can definitely be a 7 or 8 seed. And I think for Charlotte fans, that's great because you've been perennially one of the worst teams in the NBA for however long. I don't even know, what, 100 years now. So for them to even be a playoff contender, I think is huge. And I think LaMelo Ball has been better than what anybody thought. I was high on him in the draft. I liked him, but I didn't think he'd be this good. And I think he has paid off big time for this team.
Yeah, and honestly, LaMelo's kind of slid under the radar for me this year, and it's undeservedly so. I mean, he deserves attention. And to start the year, Trevor, I was laughing because people, ESPN, House of Highlights, Bleacher Report, all of these highlights.
They do like LaMelo Ball.
They would do LaMelo Ball highlights, and I remember distinctly, Trevor, game 1, the Cavaliers played the Hornets, they beat them.
Right.
Rozier popped off for like 45. And you know what they do? They post LaMelo Ball highlights where he had 0 points. They posted LaMelo Ball highlights. He had 0 points that game. And I laughed. I was like, well, what is this? This guy's not even good. And I kind of waved them off and kind of forgot about him for a while. But you're right. I mean, look at him in these last few games, last 10 games or so. He's playing much better basketball. I mean, Trevor, they played the Houston Rockets earlier tonight. They won by 25. Held the Rockets to 7 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And LaMelo was a plus 29 on the floor. Plus 29. Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable. That means not only was he fantastic on the offensive end, he was a lead on the defensive end as well. And he has some size, Trevor. I believe he's 6'6" or 6'7". I believe. Right. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So at the point guard position, to have that size and mobility, which he has, is very important for, very helpful to play solid defense in this league. And, if he can shoot the three the way he shot it tonight and the way he's been shooting it recently, 7 for 12 from the 3-point line tonight, if he can keep it at about 38% or so, I think he could be a very, very good player in this league. I do question if he can hold that number. I think that he takes, tough shots, and I really haven't seen him have a high 3-point percentage up until this point. But, he's a young guy. He can always come into his own and start to improve his 3-point shot. And, if he becomes consistent from there, watch out. He's a great passer. We all knew that coming into the NBA. And he's a good all-around player if he can fix that jump shot. So, credit to him. They are playing a lot better. Terry Rozier, I like what he's done this year. 43% from three, playing very well. And you're right, Gordon Hayward's played well this year. I just don't like that contract long-term. But he has played well this year in kind of the number one-ish role. So, credit to him. Credit to that team. They're playing much better. 12-13 on the year. Could be a low-end playoff team. They're playing better than I expected.
Just to put things into perspective, right? And I'm going to go back to my Suns for a second. LaMelo Ball is shooting the three at 33.9%. This season, Devin Booker is shooting the three at 34.3%, right? So I think that puts into perspective that shooting the three ball at a high percentage is tough, and LaMelo Ball and Devin Booker both take tough threes and sometimes bad shots. So for me, I'm not too worried about the shooting percentage for LaMelo Ball. I think it's actually going to go up. I think as a rookie, that's oftentimes not your best years in terms of shooting percentage and scoring.
True.
So for me, I love what I'm seeing from him. I think the sky's the limit for him. And as you mentioned, that plus 29, that's attributed to him making others better. He's a great passer. I think that was the big thing, everyone liked about him was his ability to pass the ball and get other guys involved when he was going through his draft process and whatnot. And I think with him on the floor, Charlotte just seems more energized. He has a nice little relationship with Miles Bridges where they throw some nice alley-oops here and there. But I think people like playing with LaMelo Ball, and I think they play for him even as a rookie. They're already seeing him as kind of the guy, I think.
Okay.
And it's hard to deny. Plus 29, that's pretty impressive. That shows you that when he's on the floor, everything goes better for the team he's on. So I think he's done a great job. But Ryan, I don't know if you have any final thoughts.
I don't really think I do. If LaMelo can keep up, that those jump shot numbers, I think that he could very well become elite someday. So we'll see what happens with him. We'll see what happens with Charlotte. Maybe they finally become relevant, after many years, pretty much most of their franchise, years of mediocrity. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they can make the playoffs this year and make some noise. But yeah, Trevor, I think with that just about does it for this week's podcast. I think that about wraps it up. But, thanks everyone for watching, and we will be back with another episode next week. So some more NBA talk about some NFL free agency, and we'll be back next week. So we'll see you guys later.